I put this on first and then the mat, like we would think it would work eventually. It is good to see everyone this morning. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the sun as it's starting to creep out. Hopefully you got a cup of coffee this morning. Reed doing a little coffee nook area to make sure that people feel welcome and invited. And as Ami continues to numbers go down, we're going to be able to start to reopen little pieces, hopefully, around some of the fellowship opportunities and eventually get back to a coffee hour. It would be a wonderful thing. So we will continue to work that way. I want to just kind of the awareness of just where we are as church and state. According to the state, they will be lifting the mask mandate. In theory, things always change with COVID, so it's always like, I don't even want to do a COVID announcement, because by tomorrow it's outdated, right? But in theory, with the information we have, the mask mandate will be lifted at the end of March. And so there's a potential for April. And I know some people are eager, and we're ready to throw these things off. And there are others who are still cautious, health reasons, whatnot. And so one of the challenges as a congregation is to make sure that we are going to respond lovingly to everyone. We're going to not assume everybody has our opinion or our stance. We're going to leave grace. We're going to listen well if people share. We want to make sure that we're honoring people who are nervous. And I know for a fact in conversations we have people who aren't coming to in-person service because they don't want to wear a mask. And there's a chance that as soon as we relieve the mask mandate, people who are uncomfortable say, well, I'm not coming because you're not wearing masks. Right? And that's a reality. And people have a right to their feelings, their concerns, and we can say, well, just follow the science, but whose science? And everybody's arguing this and that. And so we are going to make sure that our first priority is we are going to love each other well. Right? So leave room for people who are cautious. After mask mandates, we obviously can continue to wear masks and continue to spread out in the space. There's still a question around just what the denomination will do. The United Methodist Conference, the Northwest Conference, in and of itself has been far more cautious around COVID regulations and procedures and what they're asking us to do as a church. So even if the state lifts, we may still have kind of a mandate from the denomination to continue certain protocols, and we'll have to navigate that. So I just kind of wanted to say, be aware. We're trying to move forward graciously with wisdom, and also just make sure that we want to keep that commitment of loving people and not just assuming things or imposing our position on people as we do that. The other is, and I didn't throw photos into here, and I should have, but hopefully you opened your midweek email. This is also good. I'm not going to show you photos, which forces you to open your midweek emails, right? Pay attention to those. This last couple of weeks, I did want to, we had two people in the church who I just think it's important to celebrate people doing good things. And I know that everybody's doing good things, and we may miss you from time to time, but around Valentine's, Lori came up and asked, volunteering at Night Strike at our event down there, just wanting to make sure that all of our guests on the street knew that somebody cared about them. And so she asked, can I make little Valentine cards for us to pass out? So she handmade, it was 140 of the cards, and then 120 of them had little baggies of candy. So every guest that we served the Thursday before Valentine's Day got a special note handed to them by one of our volunteers, handmade by Lori, that just said, you are loved. Just that remind basic need, right? So I also think a little bit of that kindergarten teacher curve thing. I'm like, let me do a unique class. And in my mind, I'm not the crafty type. I'm like, can sit down and cutting 140 cards. That sounds horrible to me. So I'm so glad that was you and not me. And then Debbie, just through her connections at Value Village, arranged for them to donate a ton of stuff. They did 12 boxes of boots and 20 boxes of jeans that were given to us to be able to disperse to those people in need. And it's just great to use, right? Sometimes you're just like, well, I don't know what I can do, but this is where I am. This is what I have. This is my connection. So figuring out how to do the most good with just what you have and who you are. And not trying like, oh, I can't be Lori. I don't have the connections that Debbie has. But I can be on the street passing them out. Because that's kind of my thing, right? So figuring out where you are. And I just wanted to draw attention to both Lori and Debbie because we caught them doing good this week. Other announcements, March 11th is our next blood drive, and sign-ups are up already. There's a link, again, in the midweek email, and there'll be stuff on the church's social media and all of that.
I still need 30 people.
What was that?
I need 30 donors.
30 donors. So here's what happens when you do good, too, sometimes. People expect good all the time. So our last drive that we hosted here, it was 46 units.
Yep, and they were asking for, it was 48 and they were asking for, no, it was 36 and they were asking for 24.
Yeah. So and we did more than what was expected.
Way more.
And the Red Cross is in a state where it's still in emergency with things that have been going on and the tornadoes and stuff from the Midwest and all that stuff. And so they're like, well, if you did that much last time, how about you guys do that much again? So let's just promote that. It's also really good. There's one of the neighborhood association presidents in one of our, and I think I may have shared this last week too, one of our meetings, and they were concerned about the houseless and the affordable housing, all of that. I described our church as we're the little church that could, right? Because you guys actually do a ton for the size we are, for all of that. And so now that's just how she keeps referring to us. West Portland, they're over there on the corner. It's just a little church that could, that's become our descriptor amongst some of the neighborhood associations, which I also think is just fun, right? The little church that could. So that's coming out. We'll have a few more announcements as we get into the message as well. And I just want to make sure people are still aware of tithes and offerings, easiest ways to give online. We aren't passing the plate yet. We'll figure out when we can do that again with COVID. But you can write a check, put money in the offering plate on the way back, or mail it in if that's something you prefer. But Justin's still just like, keep reminding them online's the easiest way. So we just appreciate the ongoing support of the work of this little church that could. Would you guys stand with me for the reading of Scripture and then our call to worship this morning as well? We're going to be reading from Nehemiah chapter 1. And I'm going to ask you guys to just indulge with me a little bit because I think I'm going to read the entire chapter. It's only that much. I believe in you guys. Nehemiah 1. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Chislev, these are great words, in the 10th year, while I was in Susa, the capital, one of my brothers, Hananiah, came with certain men from Judah, and I asked them about the Jews that survived, those who had escaped captivity, and about Jerusalem. They replied, the survivors there in the province who escaped captivity are in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been destroyed by fire. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, fasting and praying before the God of heaven. I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, that I now pray before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel which we have sinned against you. Both I and my family have sinned. We have offended you deeply, failing to keep your commandments, the statutes and the ordinances that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses. If you are faithful, or if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the people. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are under the furthest skies, I will gather them and bring them to the place at which I have chosen to establish my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great and powerful and strong hands. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering in your name. Give success to your servants today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. At this time, I was the cupbearer for the king. And for our call to worship this morning, you'll join me. Sisters and brothers, rejoice. We live sustained by God's presence and love.
Thanks be to God.
As we mourn the wounds of God's children,
God weeps with us.
as we struggle for justice,
God struggles with us.
as we strive for peace,
God strives with us.
as we work to build a beloved community,
God works with us.
as we offer our gifts to God,
God blesses us.
sisters and brothers, rejoice.
Sustained by God's presence and love, we worship God.
Amen. You can be seated and join us as we sing. I did print off my notes, and then I think I set them down back there, maybe by the sound booth. Well, I don't know. It's all right. It's a good thing I don't actually reference my notes a lot. I mean, I have them and study and make them. But then I just get up and talk. So, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the prophet Jeremiah. Right? And so Jeremiah was kind of challenging the people of Israel to change their sinful ways. And didn't. We mentioned that Israel and Judah were taken into captivity by Babylon, and Jeremiah actually was fleeing to Egypt. So this is kind of progressing a little bit in that story. The nation of Israel's been taken captives, all of that working. Basically, when the conquering country would come in, they would take all of your best, the scientists, your craft builders, all of that. They would go back and use them for their homeland. And so Nehemiah is one of those captives. And at this point, the king of Babylon's been actually crushed by Persia. So we have a new country even overseeing it. And Persia went through a couple different kings during this time too. So one of the kings, the initial king of Persia, was like, people can go back to their homelands. We don't actually need this many people. You're crowding our cities. And allowed some of the Israelite captives to return home. But there was always this fear too that, if they weren't returned home, that they would rebuild. They would build their strength, build their numbers, refortify their cities, and then become a threat again. And so the king after that was like, well, no more, and you can't build up things, and really controlling. So they were allowed to live there, but they weren't really allowed to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. And so it's still sitting in ruins. But it's kind of this quasi, like there's freedom, but there's not freedom. You have rights, but you don't have rights. I don't know if anybody's ever, felt that way before. And so Nehemiah is a servant to the king. He's the cupbearer. And different roles that has throughout history and structure. Some have referred to even that position more highly as like almost a prime minister or a top advisor because he's always close to the king. But in reality, as the cupbearer too, he's supposed to test the wine every day to make sure he's not, like the king isn't being poisoned. So I don't know how like glorified of a position that actually is. But he was close to the king. And during this service process, people came to visit him, his brother. And whether it's an actual brother or like, hey, you're my brothers, that part is a bit unknown. But he asked this question of people there. He's like, how is Jerusalem? How is the people, the captives who escaped? Are they doing well? And even in this section when Nehemiah says, are the people of our ancestors, the home of our ancestors, are they doing well? And he gets an unfavorable report. They're not doing so well. It says that his heart broke and he began to weep and pray and fast for days, right? But I think it's an important question as we look at things like, how is it going? And we're coming out of 2021 and into 2022. And so this is kind of part of today. You're going to get a little bit of basically the State of the Union address, but it's the State of the Church address. And just asking the question for us, West Portland, here on the corner of Taylor Ferries and this other road. 48, 47? 48, yeah, I know where we are. Right? How is it going for West Portland United Methodist? And so we're going to share a financial report. Lori's going to come up. Or I suppose you can do it from there if you really don't want to come up, but people would love to see your face, and some people are at home. No pressure, come on up.
I'd rather cut hearts.
So go ahead and put the financials up if you would, and then on the back of your bulletin also is a little bit of a snapshot of what Lori's going to be sharing.
Yeah, this
Yep.
is it working? This is not my strong point. Cutting hearts is my strong point.
You're not breaking them.
If you look at our financial report, is that better, really? Oh, okay. We broke it down, made it very, very simple. Expenses, income, and net loss on profit. So we ran last year at about almost $28,000 deficit. And that was with taking $25,000 out of our investments. Now, that's not as dire as it sounds. We did have a full-time pastor for half of last year. So we've cut some of those expenses immediately. The conference does require that expensive $15,000 a year insurance for full-time pastors, which unfortunately Stephen doesn't get to be the benefit of. But fortunately he has a full-time job, which hopefully helps with that. So the other unfortunate piece is that as financial advisors everywhere are telling us, our investments are in danger over the next year or so. In particular, in our investments lost $5,000 in the last month. But the good news is that we have really faithful givers in this congregation. And so, as you can see, our tithes and offerings represent 62% of our income. The rent number is much lower than it has been in the past. Our Korean church was victim to COVID and they had a lot of loss. So they're only at about 50% of their current income. So Stephen, Ted, and I have been working to set a new rate for them. Their current rate is about to expire, and we're going to be talking to them and to the Montessori school soon, in the next couple of weeks, about raising their rents, so that will be helping us a little bit. Some of the operating costs that you may not be aware of, that you can certainly get in a more detailed report, are about a $3,200 a quarter water bill, because we have so much surface groundwater coverage, and so our water bills are huge. Our liability insurance is about $6,000 a year, and so those are the big ones I can think of. If there are any others, you can certainly ask me. I may not know it right off the top of my head, but we're pretty good at keeping lights down and heat down. Garbage, Justin's negotiating right now with Waste Management. They recently raised their rates to $900 a month, and he's negotiated it down to $500, but we're trying to talk about a new company that may even get it lower than that. So, are there other questions about that part of the budget before Stephen talks about some of our projects?
Yeah. And there's a complete detailed report you can get from the church office if you want all the nuts and bolts of that. I do think, some of the things we are going after. Any questions for Lori before I'll go into some of the projects we're facing.
And I do want to say thank you again from the entire leadership committee for your faithful giving. It has been amazing through COVID. We've talked to some other churches who have had tremendous losses, and we really, really appreciate your faithfulness.
Yeah, there are a lot of things through COVID that I think are going really well for this congregation. Talking to the other pastors in the NAV West group, which is the UMC churches in the Portland area west of the river. Most of them are still only at about 60% of what their Sunday morning attendance was. And actually for this church, when you look around, we're filling in a little bit. We're back to pre-COVID numbers in attendance already, and we haven't even opened up. So there's this commitment there. There's some new people who are joining who we love to see. And I think there's some real momentum around that. And a lot of the desire of sharing some of these numbers is really to make sure that we know where we are as a church, right? If we don't share, we want to be able as a church to make informed decisions, right? Not just let's make sure everybody feels good or whatnot. And this can be a little bit daunting if you just look at these numbers. Things that we're already doing, we went from the full-time pastor to a part-time pastor, and the benefits that went with that. So that will be a significant drop in salaries, that portion of this for the next year. Justin is doing a lot to make sure that we're keeping down costs. He's constantly looking, and Lori mentioned, dealing with the garbage, but even the soap and paper towels, he's redone and cut that by half. He's working very diligently to make sure that we minimize our expenses around that. And then we did have, operating loss of $27,000. We pulled that $25,000 out of the investments, and that's a huge thing to be able to have. Definitely during COVID and all of that to be able to make up that. So when we pulled that out, it's only $2,800 impact on the checking account. But we are changing. We've been in a bull market. We're going to a bear market. So the investment is not going to recover the way it has been. And so we just really wanted to do real numbers so we can have real conversations as we look at the church and we hopefully come out of a pandemic. And what are we going to do? Who are we? What type of church are we going to be? What ministries are we going to prioritize as an extension of our faith and connected projects? So Projects that we have facing too. There's been some deferred maintenance around this building that is going to have to be tackled over the next few years. We have to redo our masonry. If you look at our chimney, actually most of the grout around the top 3 feet of our chimney is almost gone, which means bricks are going to start coming down. Around the building, about the first 18 inches just from groundwater and seeping up needs to kind of be redone around the entire building. There's certain spots where the gutters have overflowed, and so it's kind of called repointing, and some of it can just be the bad stuff grinded out and repointed. On the chimney, they actually are estimating they have to rebuild the majority of that chimney and take it down. Because of the steepness of our roof, we've actually only found one company willing to take on the job even, and that's at about $42,000 just for our mason work. We've tried to get more bids and estimates, but we've had a couple companies come out and just say with that roof and the angle and the whatnot, we're not touching it. So we're struggling to find people even willing to do the work. If you go back to the numbers piece, and this is kind of probably the most priority, we do have kids coming in constantly, so when the chimney starts coming down and bricks are falling on kids, I'm just going to go, that's going to be bad. So we really want to avoid that. This project is kind of being pushed to the front. We are going to have to address the roof at some point. There's little pieces on the ends are starting to curl, moss build up, and we don't have bids in currently. Ted has talked to people in the past about a soft cleaning method, which cleans all the moss out and then kind of re-gets the existing roof to lay down. But again, because of the steepness, the scaffolding involved, it's about $100,000 just to kind of clean and repair the roof as it is. And then in the basement here, underneath the Montessori section, there is groundwater penetrating one of the walls. And that concrete wall is starting to deteriorate, so that's going to have to be addressed. We do think there's another, years ago, there was a repair done kind of by the library, smaller section where they didn't pull out some reinforcement pieces, which rotted away, which that's probably where the water's coming from. So we think we know what it is. It's a little bit bigger of an area, a little bit more extensive getting to that. So that's kind of an unknown, what that's going to cost. It could be simple. It could be more complicated. So we know we are in the future looking at about $142,000 to $200,000 worth of repairs on this building, which is a lot to take on. The other thing affecting kind of state of the church and what we know is we had a proposal to move forward with the property where the community garden is to build an affordable housing, and we were going to get funds and resources for that, and that project did not get approved. And so we are working to find other ways to bring in affordable housing, various grants, different pieces. But there is a huge asset that the church has in terms of property to help at some point and possibly leverage in terms of the maintenance of the building. And so a few things we're doing already. The church cut back staffing and salaries significantly, so that number is going to get bumped a bit. We do have money in our investments, and so we will pull some of that out for this masonry project. We're trying to keep that to a minimum. We are approaching the district and the conference for grants that they have for capital improvements around the building to offset that cost a little bit. We are going to be raising all of our tenant rates, so hopefully getting about, the goal is $12,000 to $15,000 increase in income just from tenant improvements. Right now, the cost per square footage we're giving is a screaming deal for the area, so we can raise that and still be a generous landlord in those regards. But I think what is probably coming is, so we have these multiple funding streams, but I think we will be looking at a stewardship campaign this spring where we come to you with a number and we say, as a church, we need to figure out how to make up the deficit from the grants, the rent, the whatnot. and kind of above tithes and offering, what are we willing to do to invest into this church, to continue the ministry on this corner and in this neighborhood, in this community. And so I want us all to kind of be just prepared and aware. I think there's good momentum in this church. I think there are resources and there's creative solutions. Sometimes if you just look at numbers, we didn't want to share this, it would be a doom and gloom. But let's be real. We have some challenges we're going to face. How do we respond to that? Right? Nehemiah had some challenges to face. Right? He was cupbearer to the king. And in that time frame too, it's kind of interesting. He says he was nervous to even approach the king. Right? Because in that time too, when you worked in the royal courts, there was an expectation that you would present yourself well. That everything's fine. Right? To actually be in the king's presence and be downtrodden or somber could be offensive. And at that time, that's either dismissal of service, but when you're dismissed from the royal courts, that usually means you're also dismissed with your head. So like to be in the king's presence and actually be downtrodden could have cost Nehemiah his life. And he's a slave, right? He's captive, a servant to the king, and they've had all of this turmoil. It's like, how do I respond? But he also had access to the king. And so he prayed, and he decided, I'm going to go to the king. And the king sees him kind of somber and downtrodden. And it was a time where, around the king's birthday, he would often accept noblemen and different people where they would come with requests. And as opposed to like everybody bringing the king's gifts, it was almost this festival he would just disperse gifts. Like, oh, you have this challenge, let's do this, let's do this. Kind of once a year the king would be nice and kind of beneficial to people. And so it's kind of around this time, the king notices Nehemiah a little bit doom and gloom, a little like heavy. And just as we were talking numbers, I'm going to tell you, looking out at the congregation, some of you guys had some heavy faces. So maybe Nehemiah looked a little bit like you. Oh, this is weighty. This is a challenge. And the king asks him, what's going on? And he just leans into it. And he says, my homeland is in disrepair. The walls are down. My people can't find the people of my ancestors. And with boldness, well, what do you need? And Nehemiah says, I want to be dismissed from your service. I want to be able to take leave with my head. I want to return to Jerusalem. And I want, with your blessing, to be able to rebuild the walls and give my people hope. He says, all right, sure, you can go and do that. It's like, furthermore, this is Nehemiah being bold. He's like, furthermore, knowing he's going to need resources, he's like, and there's still a lot of turmoil around. So it's like, I would like letters from the king to the governors for resources. I want letters for timber. I can go to the governors and say, hey, I need wood for this, and take this wood back to Jerusalem to rebuild. Metals for the gates. Knowing who's probably going to face some adversaries. He's like, I also basically want an army to escort me. Cavalry and officers and what. And he was bold, right? There was fear. There was a little bit of like, oh, this is heavy. How are we going to do this? But then he leaned into it, and he made some big asks. And he went to Jerusalem and rebuilt the wall. One of the interesting things, and I don't want to get into the next week's message too much, the time frame of Persia taking over to where Nehemiah is in there and actually started building the wall, scholars debate, but it's at least 8 years and probably longer. And it's been in ruins. From when Nehemiah first put like the first brick back to being finished, he did it in 52 days. And in years years they lived in rubble. And there wasn't a clear plan. There wasn't a bold ask. There wasn't this willingness to tackle it. And when Nehemiah leaned into it, and it came with prayer, and it came with fasting, and we're getting ready to go into Lenten season, which is a season of prayer and fasting, and we're going to add the word discovery to it for our church. What is our why? Why does this church exist on this corner? What, if you look at even Jesus coming back, John 3:16, we quoted quite a bit. For God so loved the world that he sent his son. There's a very clear why, even in Jesus coming back. Well, why did Jesus come back? Because God so loved the world that whoever believed in him shall not perish but have everlasting life, right? There's a clear why. Why does West Portland United Methodist exist? Why is it in this community? Why is it on this corner? And Nehemiah coming back, why is it important to rebuild the wall in Jerusalem? Well, it's the people of my ancestors. They're without hope. They're in disrepair, and we need to come and instill and infuse and provide and protect and rebuild. He had a clear why. And I think one of the challenges for us, leaning into this season, prayer, fasting, and discovery. What is West Portland's why? Do we just exist so we have open doors and we can say we have a church and we have a building with a chimney that's not falling down eventually? Because that's not really, for me, like, I need more passion than that. I don't want to exist just to exist, to say that we exist. I think as Christians we're called to participate in the kingdom of God. So what does that look like for us in West Portland? What is our why? Where do we need to take some responsibility? One of the things that stands out, Nehemiah has so much. Typically, Nehemiah is one of my favorite Old Testament books. And I would encourage you guys to read all of it, but especially through the first 4 chapters. It is fascinating to me. Culturally, even right now, there's a lot of stuff going on where, well, that wasn't my fault. Don't put that on me. That was like my ancestors. I wasn't around back then. And, labels that have been thrown around and shaming that has gone on. And people are like, well, that wasn't me. And here's the part of it. So what I like in the Nehemiah is I'm fasting and praying. And in the text even says he repented, right? He was actually, if you go back to captivity, how long captivity? There's a great chance that Nehemiah wasn't actually kidnapped, but he was probably born in captivity based on the years and the numbers and whatnot. So you can't even go back and say, well, it was Nehemiah's sin that went back and caused Jerusalem to fall. But it says he's still repenting, and he goes into, because of the sins of my family, the sins of generations past. He's not like, it's not me. We get so easy to justify, and I don't know all of the stories of what's gone on, but where do we need to lean into God and say, you know what? When I have failed, or when my people have failed, when my families has failed, he's taken it on. He is fasting and praying and repenting of sins that he did not even commit, but are associated to him. He's not trying to pass the buck. Well, it wasn't me. No, I'm going to take responsibility for that. Lord, forgive me. Forgive my ancestors. Forgive those I've influenced. Forgive me for the stupid things I've said when I thought I was right and I didn't know enough. Right? One of the things I always talk about, because I've been doing this for 26, 27 years, and I think back to some of my first sermons I might have preached when I was 21. And just thinking at that point, man, I was so passionate, and I had vigor, and I was going to save the world, and I was reading and studying, and I stood up, and I confidently said some really stupid things, I'm sure. Some of them I'm aware of, but there's probably a lot that I'm not, and I have to go back like, in ignorance, right? Not knowing. In my youth, and in my ignorance, in my zeal, God, forgive me for some of this stuff. Forgive me when I've done more damage than good. There's a national poll, and I'm way off my notes, which is great. There's a national poll I just read. There's a group out of California called the Barna Association. They do a lot of statistical analysis. They're actually a faith-centered company, but they're fully committed to the scientific process and surveys and numbers and all of this stuff. And they recently did a poll across the nation, and it's sitting right about 46% of the country believes that they can trust information from spiritual leaders. Only 46 believe that they could go to a spiritual leader, religious leader, a pastor, and get accurate information. Right? There's been a break in the church. There's a break in this role as a pastor, and I didn't do it all, so let's blame them. There's been a break of being able to be trusted. We're going to drive our agenda. We're going to spout numbers that only support our confirmation bias. I talked about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago. We're only going to accept information from us. There's a point where religion and science were opposed. Like, oh no, don't bring that science stuff. Like, science is anti-God. And as opposed to saying, like, as a faith person, where does science come? Let's lean into that. Let's have some conversation. There's been this, oh no. Another article out of the New York Times I was just reading this morning talks about how insulated evangelicals have gotten because we only listen to ourselves. Oh, we have a problem. Let's go to this university that supports our thought process for solutions. We don't go outside of ourselves to possibly like, hey, what's going on in the world? And it's creating this insulated bubble, which is leading to the outside world saying the church is not a trusted source of information. We got to repent of that. If we're going to be relevant in this community, and yeah, it's not all our fault, but man, the pieces that we have of, we need to lean into that. There's a phrase in this article that really stood out to me, and this is kind of going into the why, and what kind of church do we want to be? But they're calling them evangelical exiles. Right? People who are leaving just evangelical, they're still looking, they want God, they're looking for meaning, they're hungry. But in this round two, they're referring to them as evangelical exiles who've experienced spiritual trauma. And there has been, unfortunately, a lot of harm done in the church. Now there's good. There's a tremendous amount of good. But one of the things that I think sometimes we do too, this is even that coming back to Nehemiah in the presence of the king, you're supposed to present yourself well. Right? And even within the church, there's this level of, you put on your Sunday best, and when you show up to church on Sunday, we don't talk like that on Sunday or at church. We don't do that. We put on this facade. And it's that facade that is creating this lack of trust. And there are people who are spiritually wounded, who are hungry and in search of meaning. And they're desperate to find a place. Could that be this place? Could we be a church on the corner where we become a place of spiritual refuge for people who come hurt? I mean, we read our statement at the end, which is all about brokenness and leaning into it, right? Is this what we really believe? Is that our culture? Is that what we want to see? A place where people with baggage can come or be like, oh no, the church has always been perfect. There is no baggage. Is there a place for healing? Is there a place for redemption? Because if that's where we get to, and we're talking about being a part of people's lives being transformed, hearts being renewed to Christ, families being healed, people finding purpose through faith and spirituality and a connection to a living God, I can get excited about that. Right? It's not about, we have to pay this big bill for mortar. Right? It's not about the mortar. Like, that's a thing that we have to tend to, and it's, the building. But what's our why? Why do we need to care for this building? Why do we need to keep the lights on and the doors open? Why do we need to make sure that we're welcoming and inviting? Because there's a deep healing that needs to happen in our country. I believe this could be a place healing for people. That's a pretty good why. Now, I'm one person and we're a congregation, and so we're going to go through this lens like it's not going to just be my why. I don't want to stand up and say, this is what the church is going to be about. Let me tell you what your why is going to be. Let me tell you what your vision is going to be. As a group of people, we need to lean into our values. We need to lean into our why. We need to lean into what is God calling West Portland United Methodist to? What kind of church are we going to be on this corner? And then how do we go about doing it? Once Nehemiah had a clear vision, once Nehemiah had a plan, once they began to execute it, it took them 52 days to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. What could we do if we rallied? What can we do with their vision? How do we get there? Because I think there's great opportunity. I have loved my time in West Portland so far, and I've shared that part of my broken story. Right? I was asked to resign from a church due to a divorce, right? I mean, you guys know the story. I ended up going through a divorce, and because of that, I was unfit to lead a church. I was asked to resign. We don't fire people in churches. We resign them. It sounds better. It looks more proper. And this thing was taken away, and it was 6-7 years. And what's really interesting, being asked to come back into this role and step in and pastor this church has been tremendously healing for me spiritually. Right? I love doing this. This is part of how God has wired me. And this has been a place of spiritual healing and renewal. I mean, by definition, when you read this article, I was one of those evangelical exiles. Right? I was years of training, skill, a gift to do this, I think, and yet not the opportunity because of some emotional trauma decision thing that happened. Are we going to be a place of redemption? Are we going to be a place where people lean in and find healing, purpose, discovery? And I hope so. I hope so. I'm excited about what this church can do and become. And I want to lean into those. And so those numbers don't scare me. They're just numbers, and we just got to figure out the plan. And we just got to lean into it, and we got to make decisions. And so let's discover our why. Let's lean into our vision. Let's look at real number, make informed decisions, come up with a plan, and then execute. And then see what God does through it all. And that's the prayer at the end. God, like, show favor to your servants. Let your presence be with us. Right? Let's make sure that we're leaning into that God-honoring piece, because there is hope in this congregation. There's hope in Southwest Portland because this church exists and wants to reach and be relevant. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much for everything that you do. And I think even just language and the impact of that. Oh Lord my God, what does that mean in that statement? But I pray that our focus and our eyes would be on you. I pray that you would give us a vision. I pray that we would lean into your purposes for your people, your heart to love others, so that they shall not perish but have everlasting life. There's such a strong why, Lord. Help us to discover it. Help us to know what that actually looks like for the small little congregation. Lord, help us to lean into it. Help us to make wise choices around finances and limitations. Help us to know how to execute, how to formulate a plan. God, I pray that you would be that God of awe. That we would look back at this year and say, this little church that went through a pandemic, limited resources, limited numbers, and look what happened. And not because we were skilled or fanciful, but because you are a God who is so faithful. You are a God who compassionately cares about the people. But I pray that we would be able to discover the work you want to do and that we would join you in that. this in your name. Susan and I were talking about that song, and our desire really is that would be kind of our prayer going into this: "Be thou my vision." Right? And if we just look at other things, we get distracted or lose our eyesight. We lose our vision of God. We can get a little despair or downtrodden. So I really encourage you guys throughout this week, even play that song on the radio, play it on YouTube. Like, spend some time with it, maybe even daily, once a day. Make that your prayer. Lord, be thou my vision, right? Give me thy wisdom, right? Like, that's our prayer through this season. I really, really encourage you guys to lean into that. I'm going to skip our joys and concerns just because of time. If there are things you'd like us to be praying for, please reach out to the church. Let Justin know. We'll get that out. But if you guys would stand with me for our benediction, that would be wonderful. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things are great, and all things can be mended. Not Susan also to kind of sing us out today. Sometimes she just does a postlude, but it's a song that's been in my mind as I've been preparing. It's "As the Deer Panteth for the Water." Some of you guys may know that song, but there's just this part where it says, "So my soul longeth after you." Right? As the deer needs water, there's this longing, there's this hunger, there's this drawing, and that's like the prayer that we have that motion that God's tugging on our heartstrings and drawing us near to Him. So I've asked her to sing that and sing us out today. If you know it, please join with us.